Hello and welcome back to the show. I'm really excited about our guest today. Our guest is Kurt Uhlir. And just to tell you a little bit about him before we get into things, Kurt is a serial entrepreneur who has actually helped his clients and investors accumulate over $10 billion in valuation. That's billion with a B in their business ventures. So he is a serial entrepreneur. But over the past couple of years, he has actually analyzed over 50,000 real estate agent websites to see what's working and what's not working in terms of their online presence and online marketing. So we are definitely going to be diving into that today. But definitely, I want to just bring on my guest today, Kurt. Kurt, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So before we kind of get started into the nitty gritties and the details and, talking a little bit about how real estate agents can improve their online presence, would you mind kind of just introducing yourself a little bit, telling us a little bit about who you are, how you got started, running all these different types of businesses and kind of how you moved into real estate in the past couple of years?
Yeah, happy to. You mentioned serial entrepreneur. I'm kind of that both serial and parallel entrepreneur. I'm blessed to not have to sleep very much. And so I almost always have multiple things going on and have for most of my life. And so I've been in like high growth tech companies, real estate, you mentioned for the last 5 years. And but I have always had other things going on because like I had so much going on business wise. Even at 14, I had to form 2 LLCs at that year, and so I had employees in both, and which is cool. I've kind of figured out like I always triage well, and so operations work, standard operating procedures, and that's how you're successful in business, but also in marketing. And so literally since that growth trend, I've been in part of starting some of the marketing channels we all use today. And I've been in real estate for a number of years, and actually I've looked at 50,000 websites or more, real estate websites or more in each of the last 4 years. So there's been some overlap, but it's probably somewhere about 150 to 200,000 real estate agent websites, and a ton, like the vast majority of those, I get to see the back end of their CRMs as well. So who's actually growing their business, which sometimes is very different than who you think is growing their business.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's probably one of the most important things I think people, will see out there is that they think somebody's, have this great presence. And then on the other hand, who's actually growing their business. So just right off the bat, right, from analyzing all those different real estate agent websites, what are some things that you're seeing in terms of trends of who is doing the right things and what kind of agents are doing, maybe not the right things online?
Yeah, well, let's start with just the not the right things. It's amazing. Like even when you go to NAR and they have stats about how many agents have a website. That's from a self-selected survey or a survey where agents have answered. And when you go dig into it and you go, hey, how many agents, and it's still only like 20-25% say they have a website, they don't have a website. It's kurt.kw.com or kurt@exp realty or Coldwell or something. And that's the brokerage website. Because if you change brokerages, you lost that subdomain website. And so I think that's the biggest thing for like what people are doing wrong is like they think that they they have their own site, and they don't. Not that it's a bad thing. Like, hey, you're with a brokerage, you should use their tools, use their platforms, but acknowledge that they own that back end, not you. And so that's a biggest thing I think from what people are doing wrong is they think they've stepped forward and been like, I knew I need a website, but they're, instead of using it as part of their mix, they think they have it solved when actually they should go start their own website. And there's actually, it's a small percentage, like maybe 10 to 12% of agents have their own site, like something hosted on WordPress or Wix or something like that. And so that's where you start to get into agents doing it right. And I look at Bill McCube, he does WeSellSarasota.com, or Jay Valento, he's an agent in California that does RedWagonTeam.com. They have their own sites. And it's both of them are the hub for everything they do digital marketing wise. And so they, sometimes they're good on Facebook, sometimes somebody's good on TikTok. Those agents, they have done that good step of saying they built their own website, they've invested time over time. So it's not just a bunch of money at once to rank on Google. And then if they want to do email, they still point people back to their site. They want to do TikTok, that's great. But when TikTok or Facebook changes their algorithm, their client base still knows how to get in touch with them.
Right. That's really important as well. I think you're absolutely right on the money there. It's like most agents just use the brokerage administered website,
Yeah.
and I think, there's definitely benefits to it, but like you said, that's not the actual maximizing your online presence. So when we talk about, building websites, and a lot of real estate agents will hear this and they'll think, well, how much time and effort do I have to put into this? And is this really something for me? And I'm super busy and I'm not really a technical savvy person. So when you talk to agents, what do you usually see in terms of, how much technical ability do they have to have? How much time and effort do they have to put in this? And is this something really complicated, or where should an agent start when it comes to building a website?
It's a great question, because so often I'll come in and talk to a realtor association or a big team, and if you kind of diagnose the questions, agents feel locked. They feel just frozen. They don't know what to do, so they don't do anything, and then they don't acknowledge that's a decision in their business by itself. And so you can, I mean, there's a big spectrum there, but I'm like, on the minimum side, to have your own website, like in my opinion, it should only be hosted on WordPress.
Mhm.
It's super simple, still get set up, even though sometimes it doesn't feel that way for those not technically savvy. But you have two choices about how you can do that. You can, I mean, I guess three. You could build it yourself, and many agents can, even those that aren't technically savvy. But you can also go to somebody like a small boutique firm like the X Concept, and or somebody like an Agent Buyer, and they will build your website for you. And those are great options, both of those and many others. But what I find so many agents, it's so easy, is you have a 14-year-old daughter, you have a son, you have a niece or nephew, like they're technically savvy if you aren't. And I like the stories where I hear where agents get unstuck and they go, I'm not technically savvy. They brought in their 14-year-old daughter and said, hey, I want a site. I'm going to use, say, Showcase IDX. And can you help me on Saturday build it? And it can be as bare minimum as a homepage that says who you are with a search widget, and then something like Showcase IDX brings all the listings for your MLS and all the listing detail pages. And like your daughter or son might be able to build that for you in 2 or 3 hours sitting next to you at the kitchen table. And you also started to bring them into your business, which is good for parenting as well, I find. So like that's the bare minimum to get started. And it's basically free outside of paying, $20 a month for hosting and the IDX fee. The more expensive thing, let's say you go to somebody like the X Concept or Agent Fire and you have them build your site. Also a great option. And so if you can't build it, pick one of those two and go forward with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just being resourceful, right? It's not
Right.
just, these are some things that, people can kind of just, like you said, hire out or find like a family member to help out, right? And it's actually a great experience for both you and, your kid or your nephew or whoever who's helping you out with that.
Yeah, I mean, hands down, if you are a parent, like this is how to start training your children about what the real world looks like, is bring them into building your site with you.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's a win-win situation, right? For the family and for the business. So in terms of building your website, right? We mentioned kind of a little bit some of the bare bones, bare minimum. You mentioned a Showcase IDX feature, a search widget. So for agents who want to kind of expand on their website, right, and build a website, what are some key features that you think they have to have, and what are some things that you think will separate the best websites from the ones that are, maybe just doing okay?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, I worked with Showcase IDX for years, and so I'm biased towards that. But there's a lot of third-party research that says that they're above everything else, because they're the only search that doesn't rely on subdomains or iframes. Technical terms, but for those those people listening that aren't technical, as a subdomain is like my website is kurtuhlir.com. When all of the technical search stuff happens on search.kurtuhlir.com, Google's smart enough to see that there's different servers serving that, treats them as different websites, and you have a huge loss of people when you change between those two URLs. So that's competitors. Or there's an iframe, which technically it's a window into another world in another server, and Google doesn't like that either, and usually consumers don't. And so that's kind of why I'm biased towards Showcase IDX. But at the bare minimum, having, say, Showcase on a site with just the home search, the search on your homepage, that's the bare minimum, because something like that is going to bring in all of the listings. Like I'm in Atlanta, so First MLS has about 40 to 50,000 listings at any one time. It would bring in all of those into your website in the full search experience, like a consumer is used to in Zillow, and they will actually use it. Bare bones minimum. Now, if you want to have better, you do what I mentioned, like Bill McCube or Jay Valento have done. You go to their websites, you're going to see community pages. What that is It's going to be a single page on their website about a property type, maybe something like open houses, or a neighborhood. I live in Bristol Oaks in Roswell, Georgia. So you might have a community page about Bristol Oaks, the neighborhood, and it'll have like 300 words of content from the agent, and then the search listings that the IDX gives you for listings there. The reason that's good for two reasons, really. One is Google loves that. Doesn't happen right away, but after about 6 to 9 months, you'll start seeing that rank against Google, because as the agent, your local knowledge, like if you just were to talk to somebody on the phone for 3 minutes and tell them why they should live in Bristol Oaks, Zillow can't do that. You can, and you already know how to talk about this neighborhood or the neighborhoods in your community. And so that's great for getting Google traffic, which is free over time. You don't do it all at once, just spend an hour a week just doing those over time. The second thing is it changes your marketing when you have that, because then when you meet somebody and they go, hey, I'm thinking about moving to Bristol Oaks, or I'm looking in this area, you now have content that's already created to drop into an email to them that confirms that you know the area. And that's huge, because like so many agents that you don't realize, like you're being vetted. And so consumers talk to 3 to 5 agents before they pick somebody. And one of those is generally Zillow, or whoever Zillow tells them to talk to, because Zillow's selling your info. And so if you have that home search that people will actually use, you might not have that competitor to call, but even so, the competitor are just taking leads. When you send them that follow-up on those community pages, people go, you know me, you know where I'm looking, and you just won that vetting process.
Yeah, that's really cool that you brought that up, because I never really kind of heard of this before, which is the community pages on your website, right? Featuring different communities that you're farming in or you're marketing in, and
Yep.
then those pages would just basically be an ultimate guide, almost type of post towards living to that community.
Yeah.
So could you maybe like expand on that a little bit, and like how
Yeah.
many should an
No,
agent
it's
have
great.
on their website, and what kind of information they have on there?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's so often agents get locked into like, hey, I have a listing. Does that address show on Google on my site? And the thing is, there's only 2 people that ever search for a specific address usually. Sometimes 3, maybe the homeowner or the seller. So that's one of them. And then the agent that's listing it. Like
Yeah.
when I'm buying a house, I never go and search for an address. Sometimes I might search for a street. I'm searching for, as I mentioned, like and so to your question about community pages, I live in Roswell, Georgia. Somebody's searching for single family, they're going to Google, single family homes in Roswell, Georgia, homes with pools in Roswell, Bristol Oaks, maybe the neighborhood, homes near Chattahoochee River. Like that's what somebody types into Google. And so when you build the community pages, you're giving Google the information to make that searcher happy. And when the searcher's happy, Google's happy because they keep using Google. And so that's really important. But the community pages can be almost anything. And so they could be property types, and you can get as specific, like down to neighborhoods. Think about how many neighborhoods are in just a suburb of any major city, much less all the places around. And so how many? Well, when I look back historically, I looked at like Showcase IDX's like 30 top customers. There was one that had just one community page because they did like open houses. That was the only thing on their website. Then you kind of had them jump into like, it was about like 12 to 30. And then there was kind of about 200-ish. And then there were people that had like 5,000 or more. And the 5,000 or more, it was kind of almost split, about a third, a third, a third. And so that's just kind of the top 30 of thousands of websites that use them. And there's different reasons for that. Some, when they only had 24, they just covered them really well. And then they invested in, it's an investment to get somebody to link to. You usually have to pay people. And so they focused on that. But as they did the others, it comes out over time. There's a gentleman named Kelly in Atlanta. He is atlantatownhomes.com. There may be a hyphen in the URL name. He has 5,000 community pages. Though he's done a Polygon search on every townhome community in Atlanta Metro. He didn't do it on a weekend. He built out 20 this week, 20 the next week. Maybe you get, drank some extra coffee and had 50 the following week. And that's the path to success, in my opinion, is, hey, there's a dozen that any agent would go, look, if I don't do condos, I don't do townhomes, I do single family homes, and I'm in Roswell, and so I want to cover these kind of big areas. Maybe that's a dozen I put out this weekend, starting my site. And then just focus on like an hour, maybe get a week and do one every week, and you end up building up that bank of thousands over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's with anything, right? It's creating content. It's almost like creating a library, like you said, like a bank of content for people. And everybody sees these, quote unquote influencers or giant websites out there, and they see, wow, like they've got millions, or probably not millions, but hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of content pieces out there. Like how can I get to that in a day, right? That's
You just
probably
start. You just start.
right. Yeah, you start with one, right? Like you said, maybe one a week, and then maybe next week you do 4 or 5 this week, and then you build that up. But you have to start somewhere in order for that to start accumulating.
Yeah, and as it accumulates and as your individual business grows, in the future, you may be able to hand some of that off to a virtual assistant. And so Nashville Home.guru. I didn't even know there was a .guru, but there's a .guru website, top level domain. And so a gentleman named Patrick Higgins in Nashville. I don't know how many thousands of these community pages he had, but when he started it, he and 3 other agents, I think there were only 4 at the time, they each just took a little bit of a time every week and they built a couple of these community pages. At some point, they had enough traffic coming from Google and enough leads coming from Google that it wasn't worth their time to not show homes and not follow up with clients. And so he documented the process and handed it off to somebody on his team that's kind of all that they do. Well, you can want to get to that, but don't feel like you need to do that at the start. Like, build that checklist as if you were going to hand it off. If you have a 14-year-old, kid that's helping you, maybe you actually could hand it off. Hey, you want steak for dinner as opposed to hamburger, then work on some community pages for me. But by documenting that, it's good for the agent just to say, here's my checklist, but you can knock these things out pretty quick too.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's pretty cool that you brought that up with these community pages, because I think it's a really cool tip. And for agents out there with websites, I think the biggest question that they have is like, what kind of content should I put out there, right? Like because you see all these websites and they're beautiful websites, but there's like no content, or they use these third-party services, which I'm not exactly sure how it works, but it's almost like white label content, right? What they put on their website, like cookie cutter
and
blog
Google's
posts.
never going to rank that if it's the same article. Like Keeping Current Matters is one of those companies. Yes. Man, like, I mean, you get an article or 2 articles every week, but it's like it's on 3,000 websites. Like, Google's never going to rank yours. But those community pages, every agent can do it, and it's like they just, same thing as you mentioned. And we talked about like building the website. They get frozen. They go, when I tell agents I have to put 300 words of content on a page, they freeze up, and I go, why? If I called you and said I was going to go buy a $500,000 house in Bristol Oaks, you would tell me everything I need to know about Bristol Oaks, and you wouldn't even think about it. You'd speak for 5 minutes, and they were like, well, yeah. And I'm like, okay, put that on page. And they're like, they get frozen. And I'm like, no, seriously, like, call your Google Voice number and speak to it like if it's a person. Take out your phone and do a voice note and give it to your daughter to say, here's what I would tell somebody about Bristol Oaks, and she'll do it. Or use rev.com and it'll transcribe it for you and give it back to you. And it's like, just whatever it takes to hack your brain to not be frozen and go, I don't know what to type. I mean, I just bought a $200 keyboard because it's more enjoyable for me to write long form content with, because that's what it took for me to get unblocked.
Yeah, man. I think another thing is agents overestimate the 300 words. They overestimate the amount of words that they have to write in their minds. And what I mean by that is they think 300 words is more than it actually is, right? So I write a lot of blog posts, and most of them I get up to, people listening to this don't freak out, but like 1,500 to 2,500 words. So it's a lot of words, but it's not what you think the amount of effort you have to put into it. It's probably maybe taking me 1 or 2 hours to, get the words out there. And then the other time is just really just optimizing the post, making it look good and everything else on the other end. But 300 words, you can probably knock that out in maybe 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a third of a page of text, maybe a half a page of text most. And it's like when I find agents actually, when they get over the being blocked, they actually usually end up writing much more than that, because like I said, if I call you and said, look, I want to buy a home, within 2 miles of the Chattahoochee River because there's a river walk, and I'm looking at Bristol Oaks, it would be hard to get most agents in Roswell to shut up after 5 minutes about this neighborhood and because part of that, they would mention other neighborhoods too. Well, then that's a point then where it's like, well, go right to the other neighborhood then, and then link between them. And it's like, once they get into the motion of it, it flows. But I literally, I find with agents, because so many agents live on their phone, this is the key for unlocking it. Do a voice memo as if you're talking to somebody. And like, that tends to be the single thing hack that gets agents unlocked, to be able to just regurgitate what you already know, and then you have something to put on the page.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times I feel like the agents will be surprised after they do their voice note to see how many words it actually comes out to be. It might be even a lot longer than they thought
Oh
it
yeah.
was, just because they never stopped talking about it.
Yeah, and I mentioned rev.com, rev. So it's literally rev.com. It's $1 a minute. So like, you can do a voice note on your phone, and if you talk for 5 minutes and you give it to them, they will transcribe it and give it back to you for $5. Just don't buy a latte today. You just paid for your community page.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome, man. So these are all great tips I think you're sharing with agents for not just what they need in terms of online presence, but why they need it and how to actually create content to supplement it as well. So I think another thing is, now that the agent has the website, right? And I think SEO is going to be a big part of this because of the community pages and Google search. But on top of SEO, what else do you see in terms of agents getting their websites out there? Because now they might have a website set up, they have their community pages, and maybe they're just waiting for SEO, or maybe they don't know how to do SEO. So what are some of the best ways to actually get your website in front of different people, in front of your audience, so that it actually starts, generating traffic?
Yeah, great question. So, well, SEO will take time, and so just writing the content is going to be helpful. And so you might have a 6 to 12 month kind of leadway for those community pages to start to kind of move their way up into the rankings as the average agent. So you can accelerate that by two ways. One is you can drive traffic to it. And so you can spend a couple of dollars in pay-per-click just around that like local keyword, like Bristol Oaks or Roswell, send people there, and that'll kind of shorten your time period, because Google's going to be, traffic is coming, they stay on it, which is good. But the other thing is like, it's link building. And so it's like, there's all these people that claim to be gurus and all these ranking factors. And does Google look at 300 plus ranking factors? Yes. Does the data also say that the single largest driver of rankings, what is it? It's links. And how do you get that? You go out and do link building, or you pay somebody to do it. And so literally in most cases, if you're reaching out, free links are really hard to get today. And so you end up, best thing is like, look, figure out what your investment is, whether it's $100 or $1,000 a month, and have a quality search engine, SEO agency just do link building for you on your homepage and the community pages. That will both shorten the time for Google carrying, but it also help you rank higher overall for those. I mean, nobody likes to talk about that, but it's like, at the end of the day, you go to an agency and you give them $2,000 or $10,000. A big portion of that budget that they're going to use behind the scenes is going to be building links for your site. And so as an agent, you can do that yourself. And so there's places you can do that. I have recommendations, but I also think it's one of those things you ask others that are doing it well and trust them.
Right. Yeah. Link building. I mean, that's one of the first things that Google ever started in terms of their algorithm, right? It's the one constant that's been pretty much consistently Google has been using in terms of ranking different things, is how many backlinks it has towards your website.
Yeah, and quality backlinks. I mean, so
Right.
much of what their effort has been over the last even like 10 years has been the spam links, and you can get a lot of
Right.
you can buy bad links, but if you're getting quality links, and there's a difference between those two, then that's what Google cares about. It's a vote of confidence. And so and it's also in some cases it's easy for the agent to do that as well. And so the same thing about like, how do you get content, to your point, what I put on the site, you use this or you use Zoom. Like, hey, what else do I want on my website, or what do I want for my newsletter? Well, agents actually tend to be much better at like standard operating procedures and doing things repeatedly than other small business and service providers. So call your appraiser, or call the appraiser you work with, call the plumber you recommend, and go, hey, can we put time in the calendar for me to interview you in spring next year? And so I just want to record it so that I can send it to my clients about, hey, it's spring, as a plumber, what would you say they should be doing on their house right now? And like, do that with the financial planners, the other service providers that your homeowners and clients will be using. That's content you just created a YouTube channel that you didn't even like have to do anything for, but put a calendar of that invite on. You don't have to do any editing. Just take the Zoom recording and put it on YouTube. It's better than what you have now. And then when you tell them, because they want content as well, but it's like the home inspector, they're never going to do, almost never going to do like the spring checklist for your home. So you put 15 minutes on the calendar, you ask them questions, you record it, you put it on YouTube, you put a simple little post up in your site, and you follow back up with Bob and go, hey, Bob, here's the link to that. Bob's going to send it out because he's been paying Constant Contact for 14 months or 14 years and hasn't sent a newsletter ever. Well, you just gave him content. He's going to send out a newsletter then. That's gold.
Yeah.
That's also how you drive traffic back to your site and boost SEO then.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like cross content posting, right? Like we have the information in one place, but you can use that same information and turn it into multiple pieces of content. And it's one of the reasons, and you mentioned interviews, but that's one of the reasons why I love podcasting, is because it's basically 45 minutes an hour and we have content for basically the rest of the week. So and beyond that. So it's a wonderful thing. So I'll for agents getting out there, start interviewing, like you said, some of these vendors that are working with, some of these, service providers that you're working with. It's a great way to provide content for your audience, and also do it in a way where somebody else is coming in as the expert. So
yeah, well, I mean, it's one of the reasons I do it. I mean, I have about 30,000 people on my personal email list, and maybe a third of those are agents. And so whether it's real estate related or our leadership podcast, when we talk like this, and when this goes up, it gives me then content that I didn't have to create some other way, and I can send it out to my list. So I literally am doing the same thing that the plumber is going to do, the home inspector, if somebody comes in, if an agent goes and interviews them. And so it's simple content when it's good.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the other things I think a lot of agents will want to know when it comes to generating leads online is how to actually generate the leads, right? So they have all the content out there. It's great. They're getting out there. Traffic's doing wonderful, but they don't have any way to actually capture the leads. So in your opinion, what are some of the best ways that an agent can actually capture traffic and turn them into leads? And I know you mentioned in the very beginning of the podcast, who's doing well on the front end, but also analyzing the back end CRM.
Right.
And what are some things an agent should have on their website or connected to a CRM through their website to actually convert and generate these into clients?
Well, that first part still is having the website. And I pause there because so many times I'll find an agent, then they're talking, and I mean, they're in a small market even. And they may have 10,000, 15,000 followers on Instagram. And if you're in like Montana, like that's a massive, I mean, you might as well have like 3 million people in New York. And it's like
population of the state.
Yeah. So it's like you are like the dominant like density for that area. And then they don't have a website, or I go to their website and it's a business card site that basically just says, hi, I'm an agent, and it might have like their phone number and email. And so without having a website, or without having a website that people would actually search on, you could do as much as you want on social, and you're never going to collect the leads like the way you could. Like, people will pick up the phone periodically and call you, but you have to have that website. And so many agents just gloss over that. And then, or they have a very basic website, but they don't have that home search on it, which like connecting. So many agents will have a site, but they won't have a home search. And they go, well, my clients are just going to use Zillow. Well, if you give them the free IDX that comes from your local MLS, well, yeah, of course they're going to go use Zillow, but that's not always the case. Like, go ask Jay Valento at redwagonteam.com. Like, how many of his clients use his site? A bunch. And so that is like, you have to get that feedback. Like, would you use my site to search? And then even without there though, you should have, I mean, the IDX, like Showcase IDX, it will have prompts that when somebody wants to ask a question about a house, register. They want to save a search, register. And then that's built in. You have a CRM like Follow Boss, you can connect it up, it'll send it over. But if you're doing those interviews that we talked about, well, then you need to just on each one of those pages, ask people to sign up. Put a prompt on there to sign up. Did you enjoy hearing the spring tips when I talked to Bob, the home inspector? Well, I only send out one of these every month. I'll never sell your information like Zillow. Sign up here and I'll send you the next month one. Like, say exactly those words, and people will go, wait a second, Zillow makes money selling my information. Yes, they're not primarily an advertising company. You don't send out too many and you won't sell my info. Like if they saw value, that's all it takes.
Yeah, absolutely.
It
So
doesn't have to
that's
be complicated.
right. Yeah, and I think a lot of agents they think it's complicated, and that's why they don't take the action to do it. If that makes sense, they think they have to connect it with like a ClickFunnels account, or they have to connect it with some kind of integration. They think whenever they think websites, they think they have to code something, and that's clearly not the case, right? Like it's a lot easier than people think, but once you have it, it's a very, very powerful tool to not only can it generate you traffic,
Yeah.
but it can convert your leads just automatically, like you said.
Yeah, and most websites, I mean, we'll just stay with the Showcase IDX example, is like it's going to have an integration with, like, if your brokerage like if you've chosen your own CRM, that's great. But if your brokerage gives you something like KV Core, well,
Right.
it's going to integrate with that. And so use it for what it does well, which is the CRM bit, the drip campaigns, and the website. Once that gets up, it's just like click a button, connect these two, and then when somebody signs up, it sends the lead over. You don't have to know as the agent technically how it happens. That's why there's a click to integrate button.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just all about kind of like understanding the power of the website more so than kind of trying to figure out how you could, technically build, some kind of new website from scratch. So and I promise like it's probably a little bit more complicated than setting up like an Instagram account, but it's definitely doable, especially considering what the actual value and benefit is after
Right.
you did it. So
Yep.
probably one of the most important things out there. So one of the other things that I think you're really, an expert on is, like you mentioned, influencer marketing.
Yeah.
And maybe you can touch on that a little bit in terms of, how an agent can use influencer marketing, whether if it's, using other influencers in their market or becoming an influencer themselves, or how to actually partner that piece of it with their website as well. Mostly, I think it will be on social media.
Yeah, great question. I think the first step is for agents to realize you are an influencer today. I mean, I think when somebody says influencer, most people think about, like, they think about the person on Instagram with 10 million followers and, and Kim Kardashian. I'm like, well, no, like, and like they may have a bigger audience, but it's like, am I gonna, like, even something local? Am I more likely to go to a local restaurant if a big celebrity influencer mentions it, or if my aunt mentions it? My aunt, she might have 57 total friends on Facebook, but it's like, I trust her. The same thing as my local agent. Like, hey, I've worked with you on something you recommend, like a local festival. I believe you I know you actually live here. So it's like, you may have a smaller following, but you have a much stronger connection. And so, like, realize you are an influencer already, but also people make decisions based on what I kind of call the influence economy. It's like, well, why should I work with you versus like the agent that Zillow sent me, when I saved a search? Well, they're telling me one thing. Well, why should I work with you? And realize that that's taking place. And so, how do you do that? Well, content we talked about in community pages is a great way. And then, yes, I do think doing those interviews, like with the local appraiser or the local, inspection company that gives like the spring checklist, like you're borrowing their influence. You're bringing people on, you're giving value, and that alone just kind of boosts your personal equity with people.
Right. So like collaborating with other community leaders and community experts. So that way you're almost borrowing their credibility. And this is probably more influential, more important for a newer agent than it is for somebody who maybe has been in the industry and been in their market very successful for like 5 to 10 years, because they would be the industry expert and they can leverage that themselves.
Well, they're the industry expert in real estate, but and so even right there, so if you're in a community where the average person buys a new home every 10 years, which is about average, some places it's much sooner, but if it's on every 10 years and you go, okay, well, let's just do the math, then it's about 6 months when somebody's an active buyer. So you're thinking about it, you start looking for homes, you actually find the home, you put in one or two offers, maybe it's 6 months from I'm going to start buying till I've closed. Well, if that average is 10 years, then that means it's not even 1 in 10, it's 1 in 20 times. So 95% of the time, 95% of your people are not actively buying and selling real estate today. So if you're only putting out content as an agent for the 5% of the people that know you that are actively buying and selling today, well, like, what are they going to do the other 95% of the time? They're going to hide your channel, unsubscribe, forget your email. But you still have a ton of content that's valuable to homeowners or aspiring homeowners. And so that seasonal checklist. Hey, let's stay with Roswell. Roswell, this was the first year in 6 years that I did not find out about our summer and fall festival once a month called Live in Roswell from an agent. It's usually the agent that sends out to me. I just happened to see it on Facebook this year because I'm friends with one of the council members. And so usually it's my agent that sends me that in a newsletter, says, hey, we're starting back. Here's the Tuesday it is, and here's what's going to be happening at that specific, festival that the city puts on. I'll still get that email. It's just like from him, like that as a homeowner, as a resident, he just kind of tickled my heart in a way, because like, oh, I remember I love going to that when I'm able to go to it. And you're the one that reminds me of it. So that's useful content for the 95% of the time. And then it also builds influence, because the second part you mentioned, like, yes, borrowing influence. The second part of building influence is just consistency. Like, how do you get to be friends with people? You don't have one good weekend hanging out with somebody. You spend time with them consistently over 18 months and you end up becoming best buds. And so it's the same thing about influence. So you just need to make sure you're doing it consistently. So whatever it takes, like, I would much rather somebody build those community pages, just one every other week, than try to do 5 this week. I don't want you to get burned out. And so figure out whatever's going to work for you consistently and do that. And don't worry about the amount. Just get started and do it consistently.
Yeah, that's so important. I think a lot of people misunderstand like the use of social media and the use of even like just websites, which is just, they think they're gonna put out one piece of content and it's gonna generate them leads, right? It's gonna be like, this is gonna be the viral video that blows up my entire page and it's gonna bring me 10 million leads. That's, I'm not gonna say that never happens, but close to never, right? Probably 0.0001% of the time that something like that ever happens. It's all about, like you said, consistency. And it's almost like a follow-up tool, like a passive follow-up tool with on your entire audience. So you have this audience and then they see you posting over and over again, and you're able to get in front of them, be front of mind. So when they are ready, buy or sell a house, you're the first person they think of, because like you said, over 18 months or 24 month or even 48-month period, they've been looking at your content consistently over that period of time.
And and that content, you should have content that's very appealing to people that are actively buying and selling. But as long as it's the bulk of the content is stuff that's useful to local residents, you're still valuable to them and throughout that whole time period. So you're in front of them. And then not only does it make sure that you get their transaction, but it's much more likely that you're going to get referrals from those people, even when they're not buying and selling. Sometimes it's because, they have a friend or family member that actually says they're looking to buy. And more often or not, it's you shared something that says, hey, here's the local festival. And that's what I send out. And my mother-in-law calls you because I forwarded on that email about the local festival.
Yep, absolutely. And that's a big part. And I think a lot of agents miss as well, is just the referral side, right? People are sharing your content. How many people can you get to share your content with their groups, right? And it doesn't take a lot. It only takes a little bit and a few people to share it for it to really spread.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Kurt, I just want to say thank you for coming on the show, and just in respecting everybody's time, we're going to wrap this up. And I think we learned a lot today about, how to build useful websites, how to build an online presence as a real estate agent, and how to, start generating some leads right to their business. Cause that's probably the most important piece of that. But for anybody who's listening or watching this that want to reach out to you or want to learn more about what you do specifically, what are some of the best ways that they can either follow you on social media or maybe check out, some of the content that you're putting out yourself?
Yeah, so for me, go to my personal website, Kurt Uhlir, UHLIR.com. That'll splinter you out to anywhere else. You want to know more about my personal life and see my young daughter and son, they'll send you to Instagram. You want to follow more LinkedIn stuff? Great. If you want, especially as an agent, I have a guide on the difference between networking and net weaving, and why networking doesn't grow your referrals, but net weaving can 3x your business this year, like free on my website. So I practice what I preach.
Right. Yeah,
or try
exactly.
to.
Right. I was exactly going to say that. Is that, just go to Kurt's website, right? Because he's the expert on this. So, and you can dissect it while you're there as well, and kind of see what's working and what's not, which is a great case study. But other than that, I mean, is there any last thoughts you want to kind of share with the audience? Leave with us here before I let you sign off.
The only thing is, I say, look, everybody gets stuck. Just acknowledging that you're stuck, and then what you need to do to get unstuck. That's where success comes from.
Yep, absolutely. Knowing how to get unstuck, how to take that next step moving forward.
Yep.
So, well, Kurt, I really appreciate you hopping on and sharing your knowledge with us today. I learned a lot myself, and hopefully our audience got a lot of value out of this. So I want to thank you again for being here, and I want to thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you guys on the next show. Take care.